Hello, everyone. My name is JP Drouin. I'm Director of Project Development at Ecosystem. I'm very pleased to be here today with you. I'm with Ruth Bennett, Director of Strategic Capital Programs at Tufts University. Hello, Ruth.
Hello.
So we're very excited to be here today. We will talk about the path that Tufts University pursued over the past few years with respect to decarbonizing its infrastructure with a focus on Scope 1 on-site emissions. So we covered a lot of ground over the past 2 years together, Ruth, Tufts, and Ecosystem, and a lot of things have changed on the roadmap to decarbonization. So we will today address two topics mainly. First, we'll look at planning, so the strategic master planning efforts we looked at, and then the actual implementation. So how does it happen once? We'll look at also some real action. And in both phases, we'll deconstruct and break down what happened to try to boil it down to the few key elements that were critical to the success. So let's go 2 years 2 years back at the beginning of 2020. Ruth, can you give us a context of where Tufts University was at back then, and where were you on your path to carbon neutrality?
Yeah, sure. So the university has a commitment to become carbon neutral by 2050. That's a second nature commitment. But we still are heavily reliant on fossil fuels, and we didn't really have a plan to achieve our goal. And we had a lot of disparate parts of the university talking about carbon neutrality and sustainability, but there wasn't a lot of gathering of all the different stakeholders and all the different ways that we implement projects. So there was a lot of interest and commitment, but not a lot of unification about how to get there.
Great, thank you. And so you had a carbon neutral commitment, right? But right. But not a lot of work still remained to be done.
Right.
Very good. So let's. So thanks for this brief context. We'll jump right into the key topics for today. So first, we'll look at elements of strategic master planning that we implemented together. We'll look at how we engage stakeholders first. How we develop custom and innovative solutions, and how we try to keep it strategic and actionable. So first of all, the stakeholders. So Ruthie, we were talking about this one recently, and you were saying that this step was not necessarily your favorite phase because you're such a natural doer and eager to get moving and have results. But nonetheless, you recognize that it was a critical step. So can you tell us how it happened, how we engage stakeholders at the beginning?
Yeah, no, it's true that I like to just get going and do, but particularly at a university, there's a lot of different groups in the university who are part of the process. So clearly there's senior leadership and trustees, but as importantly, there's the folks who are in procurement, the folks who are in finance, the folks who are in facilities and are going to manage the buildings and the projects that we do together. So we had meetings with each of these groups to talk about what their barriers were to carbon neutrality or becoming more sustainable and how they thought we could help them. In particular, finance, they're the group that reviews every single dollar that we spend on projects. And so it was really important to understand from them what they needed from us to get these projects approved and moving forward. So that was a really key meeting. Also with facilities folks, they were really excited about carbon neutrality, but they felt like once the project is up and running, if faculty or administration calls and wants a change, what's their backstop? How do they say we've agreed to be sustainable and lower our greenhouse gas emissions? And so that's why this building operates this way. So they were looking for us to give them some of that that backing as well.
Good, thank you. And it was a fairly comprehensive initiative, right? We met with each group on 2 occasions, I think, and so it was a good, good setting the foundations.
Right, because also we met with them and heard from them, and then we came back to them and said, look, here's what we're planning on doing. Here's how we address the issues that you had. Does that solve your issue, right? If we give, faculty or building users a plan of why this building works the way it does that give you facilities the backing you need to say this is why this building operates this way? Or finance folks, if we create a life cycle cost analysis spreadsheet that you've reviewed and approved, then we can always use that for every project. So part of it wasn't just hearing what their issues were, but coming back to them and saying, here's how we think we could solve it. Does that work for you?
Yep, great. Then to the next item, so finding the right solutions, and right solutions, by that we mean being very custom, unique for the Tufts infrastructure, and have them be very innovative. So this is a bit more the technical part. Getting the right solutions can have a huge impact on cost, what this means to Tufts and CapEx and OpEx. So it's really important to get it right. So first, Ruth, tell us about, I know you've said many times for you it was really important to have something custom made and not a one-size-fits-all approach, and really focused around your existing capital plan. How was that done?
Right. Well, I think two things. One is our particular campus that we're looking at, it has sort of three different sections of the campus. We have a railroad running through our campus. We have a central energy plant. So there's no one answer for even all of our one campus. And so kind of a generic, convert from steam to hot water just isn't enough for us. We really needed it to be specific to how the geography of our campus, the location of our buildings, the type of infrastructure we have. And then particularly with the 10-year plan, so we as a university create a long-term capital plan, and the schools and the administration engage in that process. And so out of respect for them, but also out of agreement with them, we need to integrate into that capital plan. That's where the money is going in the next 10 years to fund certain projects in certain buildings. And so if we were outside of that plan, we'd always be external. We'd have to constantly ask for extra money because we hadn't integrated ourselves into projects, right? And if a building is going to have a large investment in it in 3 years from now or 4 years from now, we should be involved in that process from a carbon neutral point of view. So we should be integrated into that capital plan.
Yep. Yeah, and that was really the starting point to start shaping the solutions in the various districts of the campus. For instance, in the athletics district, we had different solutions than in the upper campus, and same for the lower campus. So different buildings dictated the different solutions in the end. Also, we were able to, of course, innovate. For instance, one section of the campus in the lower with Jackson and Pearson boiler rooms, which were kind of separated from the central plant. We wanted to look for ways to connect them together and create one unified network, but it wasn't necessarily easy to do it in a way that's cost effective. So we found ways to repurpose some of the existing assets there, and that was key to keeping costs down.
Right, and also actually on that one, so Jackson is a gym and Pearson is a chemistry building. But what's interesting is not only did we think about connecting them, but Jackson is connected to 3 other buildings. So the solution started advancing outside of just those 2 buildings. And then the sort of extra innovation was there's another project uphill that was connected to our library. And in reality, we found a way to connect the Jackson Pearson project, which is down campus, up to the library on upper campus, which was already being connected to another building. So it was a repurposing of existing assets, but also looking at what else is going on the campus and incorporating that project with another project. So now I'm getting, $1 going 3 different ways, and there's just never enough money. And so that kind of thing really helps move us along because we're integrated and we're financially really efficient.
Yep. So different life cycle cost analysis were ran for different districts. Different scenarios, and then combine into a comprehensive set of scenarios for the whole campus. And finally, we selected one, which was, again, a mix of various solutions per district. And that takes us to the strategic part of the master plan. So, Ruth, once you felt confident that we had the right solutions, the next step was to get buy-in. If we can move to the next slide, please, in order to keep moving. And so what were some of the elements that we set in place to be very strategic at that moment in time?
Yeah, so one of the key things was creating a life cycle cost analysis spreadsheet, which Ecosystems did. And the key was that we went over this with our finance staff, and they scrubbed it. They asked for changes. They asked for questions. But once we agreed on it, Now we had a shortcut. Every time we had a project, we used the same life cycle cost analysis, and it was a shortcut between us and finance for them to trust the numbers that we were using and the analysis that you did. So that was the buy-in from finance, who's a key player in getting any projects moving forward. We did a presentation to senior administration, again, the executive vice president, the provost, and the president. And the key thing there was that we presented it in such a way that it was campus-wide, but also district-wide. And at the end of that presentation, the executive vice president said, find me NPV positive projects and we'll get going. So clearly the way that we had laid it out, he understood that we could move forward from the plan. It wasn't just a plan. And we have a lot of plans, right? Consultants do a lot of plans for us, but the way this plan was written, the way that it was integrated into what we had already created, our 10-year plan, the executive vice president understood we could get going. And that was pivotal for us.
Yep. Yeah. So once we had, there was solid technical analysis, foundations, and LCCA Excel files, but we put the focus more on building strategic tools of communication for strategic stakeholders, and that allowed us to to have a plan, to have the right concepts, but not necessarily have detail engineering for every single project, but that allowed us to get moving and also keep the pace faster and cheaper in a way to develop that plan. So next to onto the next slide. So we wanted to, of course, once you got that that great sign, positive sign to get going on the net present value positive, finding net present value positive projects. What do you think was key there, and did you have to reintegrate it into the capital plan to make sure that you would get to the action?
So the key was that we already were integrated into the 10-year capital plan. So that was the whole value of this strategic plan, being very specific to Tufts, not just our campus and our buildings and our central energy plant, but what we had planned to do over the next 10 years. So once we got the nod that the concept was approved, then we looked to our 10-year plan and said, what are the next projects on this campus, right? Because there already was funding to do decarbonization. And now we were able to start getting specific about where are those NPV positive projects? Where are those quick projects that we can start now while the sort of iron is hot, while the administration is excited about this plan becoming real projects.
Great. So on to the second phase of the second step of this presentation. So we looked at the planning phase, and now we're we're moving into the real action, how we hit the ground running. And so we'll look at outcome-based project delivery, having a steady carbon neutral partner, and a word on agility and momentum. So the first one, tell us what was the value for you to adopt maybe a different type of project delivery that's more focused on the outcomes, and how there's one or two projects that are starting or well underway. What is the value that you see for Tufts to adopt this approach?
Yeah, so this is really interesting because we asked our finance folks to kind of change a little bit how they communicate with us and rely on this LCCA. And so then we had to do the same thing. We had to say, if you're going to guarantee the outcome, if you're going to create a project-based delivery that's focused on outcomes, then we in capital programs have to accept that, right? We have to accept that you're design build. We have to rely on you to create the design to get the decarbonization to happen. And then we have to rely on you to construct it. And as the last bullet says, to measure and verify. So the outcome-based project delivery is what ecosystem does, but really the truth was Tufts had to change how we do business to rely on this to keep the projects moving. And we were both committed to the same results, and we relied on you to deliver them. And again, just like finance had to change, really capital programs had to change where we put our pressure, where we put our reliance, and it was on those outcomes, and the process led to those outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so now we're getting started with this NPV positive group of projects. We set up a master service agreement with that allows us to work in that way with outcome based. and so how tell us about parts of that project, how that's how that's living, and we're setting up the M&V plan, for instance, on those projects.
Yeah, so so basically Ecosystem did a detailed study to create the outcome for these projects, and we're now doing all of those projects as a whole, even though there's 5 or 6 different buildings. Each project has an outcome, but all the projects together have a net present value outcome that we're relying on. Each project has a separate measurement and verification report that at the end of the first year, you'll come back to us and talk about what you measured and did we achieve those results. So again, we really changed how we work. It wasn't every project went along, its own design and bid and build. We really created a master services agreement and said, your outcome, the net NPV positive, the greenhouse gas reduction, that's the outcome we're asking you to do, and we're relying on you to create the way to get there. So the relationship got broader in a way because we have this master service agreement, and we're doing a group of projects with one outcome, even though each of them is part of the overall larger outcome.
Mm-hmm. And how does that, what impact does it have on your team, your resources? Does it alleviate some work on the Tufts side?
Yeah, so it's a lot less work for the capital programs staff because it's a design build. So you're designing it and building it. You're responsible for all of that plus the outcomes. You're project managing it. So again, I don't need to hire a separate person or allocate a separate staff member to run the project, because not only is Ecosystem running the project, but you're coming back to me with the guarantee of the outcome. You're measuring and verifying for yourself, but also for me. So I don't have to kind of run after the project to make sure it worked or to make sure a year from now it's still working. That's your responsibility, and I'm relying on you. So it's a lot less staff time for me, and doing these projects as a group also gives me sort of an assurance 18 months from now when they're all done, a certain goal will be hit, and that's on you to prove to me. Right.
Thank you. So if we move to the next slide. So here there's a lot of, having a steady carbon neutral partner. There's a lot of ground to cover here. We could probably talk about this slide for half an hour in itself. But so there's many things. Maybe we can talk about our weekly meetings.
Yeah.
What are we covering every week? A range of various projects, range of various types of conversations. Where would you like to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about that weekly meeting is we literally talk about, when's the boiler that you procured coming, from that level of detail all the way to, the Grafton campus complete carbon neutral plan. And so I'm relying on you and the team to have all those details and all that level of specificity and larger view at the same time. So we go over, all of those NPV positive projects, what state they're in, where they are in the schedule. We make sure that all the, agreements are in place. And then we talk about the larger projects that we have, like we're building a new dorm, we're planning for a new dorm on campus, and you're a part of that. And again, that's, it's at an early stage, but it's still part of our weekly meeting. So we're sort of running the gamut every time we meet, talking about the whole breadth of what we're doing together.
Yep. So the first bullet point, refers to Ecosystem acting as a partner to review some capital and deferred maintenance project that are at the stage of feasibility study. So, for instance, right now there's maybe 3 academic buildings: Halligan, Eaton, and Breaker. Yeah, at least 3 that are in at feasibility stage, and so there are renovations planned that are in the process of being planned with other architects or engineering firms. And so you count on us, on Ecosystem, to act as a stakeholders in some of those meetings, and to convey kind of what is the carbon neutral master plan, what is the information that the teams that run these feasibility studies should be aware of, and help them, collaborate with them to make sure that they align with the plan, or sometimes the plan adapts to the needs, right?
Right. This is a real change that we created together. Usually at these meetings, there's the building user, whether it's residential life or a dormitory, or it's faculty, or it's researchers who are doing work in a lab. But now what we've created is ecosystem is our carbon neutral decarbonization stakeholder. And every project now has that as a person or a group who's part of the feasibility process. And it starts to talk about how important decarbonization is, but also it takes the resource of ecosystem out of the project that you're doing and puts the ownership of the goal, the carbon neutral plan, into all of our projects. So in some ways, I'm sort of spreading my resource of carbon neutrality into projects that even I might not be doing, but they're part of the campus. So this is a new thing for us, and I think it's really being appreciated by the folks at the table, because they want to know what to do for carbon neutral, but they're a faculty and they're trying to figure out their office or their lab. So we're always at the table now. We become part of all feasibility studies, and that's a really exciting change for us.
Yeah, and we're also working on some tools to give more, communicate better what is the carbon neutral master plan to all these different people, with some kind of cheat sheet of like building matrix that shows what is the current kind of heating and cooling configuration, and what is the desired, where do we want to go for each building or hub on the campus, so that these people don't have to refer to a 100-page report, right. And that that the moment it gets created, sometimes is obsolete very quickly. So to more rather than that, to have a more a living document that gets updated, and in addition to real interventions with the teams, but in addition to that, to have also some of these tools that Tufts can have to share easily with others, right?
Yeah, and I think also that sort of cheat sheet, that sort of building equipment and utility focus and next steps, it's good for the feasibility groups. It's also good when we have a steam leak and someone says, okay, we're going to fix this steam leak. What's the future of this area? Is it going to be hot water? Let's put a Band-Aid on this for now before we do a permanent fix. We look at the cheat sheet and say, this is going to be hot water in the next few years. So how can we think about that now while we're trying to fix this emergency? And that cheat sheet, again, sort of goes from feasibility study to in the moment, changing out the pipes. What should we do? So it's becoming really a valuable tool for the feasibility folks and the facility folks.
Yeah, the facility folks who have to deal with more live emergencies. It's not always planned. Actually, it's rarely planned, and that can translate into, well, there's a steam to hot water heat exchanger that has to be replaced. Well, it has to be replaced now. Hot water is not there at this time. Right. But what can we do, better than just replacement in kind? Maybe we can replace that heat exchanger with yet still a heat exchanger, but then can be more easily converted to hot water down the road, to save on future capital costs, let's say.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I think again we're sort of trying to have you guys help us in all the times that we touch a building or we touch utilities, think about the decarbonization plan and where we can make an impact, even if it's an emergency or if it's a feasibility study, and clearly if it's a project. So the goal, right, is to make sure that we're looking at decarbonization and you're there at all those different moments in time, and not just let's create a project from scratch, because that doesn't often happen. Let's create a project from scratch. We've got a 10-year plan, or we've got emergencies. These are all sort of thought out, mostly ahead of time.
Yeah, and even though we have a fairly coherent master plan for the whole campus, sometimes when a new strategic project pops up, like this new dorm building that's being planned, well, we're running separate, smaller, still a master plan, but at a smaller level, and looking at different carbon neutral scenarios, maybe 3 or 4, running life cycle cost analysis, and we just recently selected the way to go that's both good for the short term of this new building, but also looking at how it impacts the future of that district, because the moment you take one route, it impacts all the other buildings, and how these other buildings around it will will have to become, integrated into the carbon neutral in the future.
Right, right. I mean, again, we're sort of relying on you to say, when we ask you to look at something on the campus, right, connecting our central energy plant to a new proposed dorm, we also want you to look at the other buildings around that dorm, or what else is the central energy plant proposed to do, and how does this affect that? Can we get decarbonized earlier because the new dorm is going to affect the central energy plant? So we're always looking for the ecosystem team to help us not only think in the moment, but further on and broader, right? Because our campus is so interconnected. It's rare that one building is completely out on its own. That's just not how we're set up.
Yeah, and of course on weekly meetings we talk about, projects where we're currently building. We have contractors, we have kind of an operations team that is detail engineering, construction managers, and so we also cover these things. And sometimes we have to do some kind of active planning, which takes us to the next slide. How do you keep agility and momentum? And we'll move faster on this slide because we spent more time on the previous one. But I wanted to ask you, how do you keep a balance between planning and action? If you just plan, well, you're not moving, but if you move too fast, you may run into situations that you hadn't planned. So what is your approach to this kind of dilemma?
Yeah, you know what? We're doing them both at the same time. I mean, in our weekly meeting, we're talking about literally, where is the boiler that you procured on a project? We're talking about all the 8 NPV projects that are happening. We're talking about the carbon neutral plan for the Grafton campus. And then we're talking about, next summer, we need to start thinking about NPV phase 2. So we have to do both at the same time. We have to keep moving. We need these projects to happen. And again, integrated into the master plan gives us agility and gives us momentum, because we don't have to ask for new funding. We don't have to think of a new project. We don't have to go for all the approvals, for the plan. We're already in there. People have talked about these projects already. And the planet is burning. We don't have time to make another plan. The plan really has to be actionable and integrated into what the university was thinking of doing and where they're spending their money anyways. We don't want to try to get a new separate funding stream, because it's just hard to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we try to have a good enough master plan, and then on a recurrent basis, we plan for the next day, as well as for sometimes we have to adapt the master plan for the next 5 years in the same meeting.
Yeah.
So that keeps everybody on their toes, but it's working out very well so far. So, and so thank you. Next slide, please. So how do you reflect, Ruth, on, let's say you're in 5 years from now, and you really feel like your team did a great job. You're exactly where you want to be at Tufts on the road to decarbonization, on the road to carbon neutrality. What did you do right? What are what went right? What were the key elements to that success? How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've said it before, but I think that the most critical things that we did were those stakeholder engagement, right? The finance folks, we have a shortcut with them. We don't have to reinvent it every time. And being inside the capital plan. I mean, in 5 years, I hope that we don't have to go inside the capital plan, but the capital plan has decarbonization as part of it. I don't need a third party to come in and say, here's a project, but that the 10-year capital plan, decarbonization is a piece of everything that's in there. And I think as we do these NPV positive projects, we show that we are lowering our greenhouse gas emissions, and we follow that trajectory. And we can say, here's what we did in 5 years, right? Here's the plan for the next 10 years. And I really hope that we say, how can we make that happen more quickly? How can we make it happen faster? Because we've gotten on a roll, because we know how to do it, because ecosystem owns the outcomes, because the finance folks have trust in the spreadsheet that talks about the cost and the CapEx and the OpEx, and that we have proof that the OpEx went down, right? Not only are we lowering greenhouse gas emissions, but the university is saving money. So to me, in some ways, 5 years from now, we are part of the capital plan. We don't have to knock on the door. We're actually part of the planning of the next 10 years at Tufts.
Well, that's well said. I'll leave it at that. So that's all the time we had today. Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. That was That was great, and wish you and us the best luck possible and success in pursuing decarbonization at Tufts University.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.